Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. This week we got a special guest, a boy with Alberta roots, Michael Higgins. How are you today, Michael?
I'm good, Brad. Thanks very much for having me.
It's I've been waiting to have you on the show. You're kind of a special guest. You're a food geek like I am. You have roots to Alberta. You're a Hinton boy.
That's right.
Yeah, born and bred in Alberta. And you had a dream.
I did, yeah. It's funny how we, especially today, there's a lot of people that, talk about work and doing what you love. And I was one of those lucky people that I am doing what I love, and I've been doing it for quite some time now.
Right. So we may as well break the ice here. The outdoor industry is hard to get into. What is your dream job that you're currently working at?
Well, I'm the director of a television series called Canada in the Rough, and I've been working here now for my 15th season. We're really excited because we're just ready to release season 17.
Yes, well, it's a long-running show in Canada, and for me, it's sort of like the Canadian bucket list. You guys get to go to places where the rest of us often dream about getting, or you help us create those dreams and show us how to make it a reality.
That's the whole premise of our show. At the root of it is that we hope that the viewers at home feel like they're coming on the adventure with us. So there's a very vast range of viewers that we do have, and it's not all hunters. There's many non-hunters that actually watch the program. We are a documentary status show, so it's not just about the kill for us. It's about the adventure, where we go, the people we meet, all the new information that we see, and the beautiful scenery and encounters. And it's important that when someone's sitting at home, they really truly feel like they're there with us.
Right. And with more and more people in our society wanting to get outdoors, wanting to experience or at least try or figure out if they like hunting, it's a great introduction.
Yeah, we hope so. I think that's a good point, and I don't know if I've ever looked at it that way, but yeah, we do show the good, the bad, the ugly. So it is a very much real experience watching the show. We don't sugarcoat things. So yeah, if there's something on the show that you don't think you're going to feel comfortable with, that's probably a good sign. But there's so many amazing things that we do get to see and experience and capture, and get to bring to everyone's TV at home. So yeah, it's a pleasure working on the series.
Yeah, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there. You never know what you're going to get for a show or what people are going to see, because it is real life wild outdoors, and things happen that sometimes, people like you and I that spend a lot of time out there and do a lot of traveling, see a lot of places, the least expected things happen, but it makes things very entertaining and is somewhat of an eye-opener in terms of what the outdoors can provide for us.
Yeah, like when it comes to producing a show, we always go into the field with a plan, with everything's not everything's laid out, but we have a hope that this is what's going to happen, and you have to be ready to pivot where the story takes you. And that's just like hunting. You go out with a plan that you're hoping to hunt this particular tree stand in this corner of a field, but you got to be ready to change those plans at a moment's notice if you want to be successful. So it's one of those things that it's a hard thing to capture properly on camera and tell the right story. But as much of a struggle as it is, that's what makes these adventures so great. A lot of times we kind of have a saying, like, when the crew is having an awful time, they're getting hit with lots of rain and cold and wind and everything else, we're having a miserable moment. In some manners, we know that we're capturing some of the most entertaining footage many times. So it's kind of one of those things. Don't be afraid of the unknown.
Right.
And take it as it comes and enjoy the adventure.
Embrace it.
Yes, absolutely.
And you make a good point that a lot of people don't realize is that this show is professionally produced. It's not like you guys run out there and record some stuff and say, okay, now what do we do with it? Let's put together a show. You really think it through. So I think that comes from your background. Maybe you could just share a little bit of your background in terms of what makes you unique in the industry.
Yeah, sure. I got lucky. We're in, I think it was grade 6 or 7. We had a professional speaker come to our elementary school and talk to the whole school about jobs and things you might want to do with your life. And I just remember her saying, like, write down 10 things that you love to do and see if you can make a living at one of those. And the time, and still to this day, I was a very big movie buff, and I decided to let's start picking up a camera, and I started filming from elementary school and doing all my projects and making them into videos. Even English class essays got turned into video projects somehow. And that love affair just kept growing. And I worked in the indie film world for a while and cut my teeth there, and then I've worked in many facets from there, from news to gardening shows and renovation shows and big commercial shoots and feature films. I did 3 years at Conestoga College for radio and television broadcasting and learned a lot there. And then right out of college, I actually co-opted at a really big film firm. And I always loved hunting, but I never really put hunting or fishing outdoors and filming together before. And one of Conestoga College graduates sent a message to our school while I was there saying that they were looking for a co-op placement. So it just happened to be, it was at Bob Azumi's Real Fishing Show. And I've been a huge fan of his always growing up, and had an autographed baseball card. It was always like hanging in my mirror in my room. And so I applied and got in, and right off that co-op placement, they offered me a job, and I took it. And I kind of never looked back from that point on.
You know, that early television was quite instrumental for a lot of people in terms of teaching them new fishing techniques and different things in the outdoors. It was, it really changed the way a lot of us look at the outdoors and how we approached our passions.
Yeah, I think that's what a big responsibility to the shows that are being produced now should have, or should be thinking about when they are producing, whether it's a fishing or hunting, is, you are putting this content out for so many people to see. So you have a very large responsibility to do it ethically and morally. And, you're never going to get every single person to agree with your thoughts and feelings and methods, but, you should be doing your best to promote whatever sport it is the best you can. And, do it right and do it proud.
Absolutely. You actually fall into a unique category. At least I'm going to categorize you. You're probably, you are the only person I know that has, because you have filmed in every province or territory in Canada, you've probably eaten wild game in every province or territory.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you there. Yeah. I've been lucky. It's like at least 3 times or more for every province and territory. And I think we sure would have eaten wild game every trip. So yeah, you're in one of yourself as well. You must be in that category.
I'm missing Newfoundland. I'm going to have to fix that, but I am missing one.
Well, we can fix that, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then you've also been to Italy, Finland, Russia, and Namibia.
Yeah, Namibia was last year, and what an experience. It was all the overseas stuff that we do on the show. We don't do it very often, and it's very special to us to have an opportunity to go somewhere else. And Namibia, Africa itself, was a continent we wanted to go to and kind of learn for ourselves, is hunting good? Where does that money actually go? And so we had the opportunity to go to Namibia, and it was a life-changing experience for me, that's for sure. Not only did we go to such an amazing outfit, which was the Jan Olasi hunting safaris. But the people there, everyone from the top right down to the bottom with all the crew that worked there, their hearts were so in it, and they were doing conservation the way I've never seen it done before. And I wish more people took that model and used it over here in North America as well. Right. They use the animal. Every single ounce of that animal is used so well. And there's so much love for the animals and the animal habitat, and all that money that is spent there goes straight back into it. And it was amazing to see.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. The one thing that sticks out in my mind when I went to Namibia is our zebra hunt. When we processed the animals, the skinners, like they even cut the leg bones into 4-inch pieces and wrapped them in foil to put on the fire. When you say they use everything, they absolutely utilize everything. So it was a new perspective on food and wild game and cooking over hardwood coals. Most of those people have a steady diet of that because they can buy wild game in their grocery stores, and a lot of the ranches and outfitters and hunting concessions, they actually sell extra meat to the stores. So quite a bit of...
Yeah, that's a great way, like, to be able to actually sell and use that wild game and not just have it within yourself, your family, and your friends, but to actually sell it is such a great opportunity. And you're right, that's they're definitely their main diet for sure.
Right. Now, lots of people in Alberta trying to get into hunting, starting up, looking for information. Of course, we have Harvest Your Own.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
Now, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of it. Wild game cooking. How did you get started? You have a passion for it. You know, the first time we met, it was in a hunting camp, and
yep.
I think I was cooking goose legs.
Yeah, you're cooking some amazing snow goose legs that you had previously braised in this amazing Korean marinade, and then we quickly barbecued up on the Camp Chef little grill there in the back, and it was fall apart in your mouth. So good.
Yeah, and it didn't take us long to warm up because I think we had walleye the night before. We had snow goose legs, and then we shot some sandhill cranes, and we grilled those up like we would a ribeye steak. And you and I were kind of off to the races in terms of competing to see who could list the next recipe or species or wildlife that we'd eaten.
That's funny because, you get into the thing when you find another person who enjoys cooking as much as we do. It's such an easy icebreaker, and it's wherever you are, whether it's here in Canada or in Namibia, food is that common denominator. And if you can find someone else who enjoys the cooking process and where the food comes from, it doesn't matter what language you speak or whatever, you have that instant bond with one another. And the food that we had on that trip was excellent. And for me, sandhill crane isn't one of those often checkmarked items that I get to cook. So this was actually only my second time eating sandhill, and it is so true. The nickname with the ribeye in the sky, it's such a beautiful tasting meat, and it's one of those wild game meats that I would highly suggest to serve to people who have never tried wild game before.
Right, the texture, the flavor, everything just stands out. I actually took some of those birds and took the thighs, boned them out, and did stuffed crane thighs, and they turned out awesome too.
Oh, that sounds excellent. Yeah, the ones that I took home, I did a breast roast on some of them, and I smoked the breast, just real simple, kept it really, really simple, and again, sliced it thin, did a butter basting with some rosemary and garlic in a cast iron pan after the smoke, and it's as good as a great beef steak.
Oh, absolutely. And you can tell, again, you and I are off on a tangent talking about the crane, and we could probably do that for a full 30 minutes. But I'm going to take a step back about memorable trips. You know, I've been on some trips to the Yukon where I've been able to hunt big moose. I've been all over Alberta. And the one thing that stands out in my mind isn't always the antlers or the hunt. It was the meals in camp. You know, like my last Yukon trip, we cooked everything over a fire on a tripod with chains and had our Dutch ovens and coffee pots and everything over the fire. And to me, that made it a very special trip.
Yeah, it is funny how that happens, because even for us, when we're producing or planning in all the pre-production stage, we're listing all the main topics that we want to cover and what we think are going to be the highlights and stuff. And often the cooking is listed, but nowhere near the top. And like you said, once you get there and you're in the moment, the cooking often becomes a very big focal point in the whole storytelling. And for me, I get to experience that luckily many times. There's been some memorable ones. There's been Nunavut when we were doing a snow goose hunt. We were up on the ice, and it was an amazing trip in itself, where we snowmobiled out like 6 or 8 hours, and we were camping on the ice in these little huts, and we'd stayed there for like 3 or 4 days, and we saw polar bears and seals, and we shot a bunch of snow goose, and we had an amazing time in that essence. But then to experience their traditional ways of eating was something else. There was a lot of raw food. So they actually harvested a caribou and some seal. So we got to try raw caribou stomach lining, which was not very pleasant to look at in the moment, but it was something for me I wanted to try. They were eating the fat behind the eyeball itself, the trachea. I got to try some raw seal fat and seal blubber, which was very shocking to see how dark that meat is. It's almost as black can be. And then it goes anywhere from all across North America to back to Africa. Out of all the most amazing once in a lifetime experiences that we had there, like we darted rhinos and put GPS trackers on them and took blood samples and released them again, and darted leopards, and there's so many experiences. But the most memorable for me is we were back at the skinning shack one day, and I noticed someone had harvested a giraffe, and I saw them taking the leg bones and they're throwing them on a fire. And at first I thought they're just burning them to get rid of them because they're so big. And I decided to walk over and talk to the person who was doing it. And he didn't speak English. I didn't speak his languages, but we managed to get across, asked him if he was cooking it to eat it. And he said yes. And he agreed to let me try some. And he was surprised that I wanted to. And they were doing, like you said, with the zebra, they were cooking the bone marrow. And I love beef bone marrow. And I wasn't going to let this opportunity go by to try giraffe bone marrow, because giraffe for them in this part of Namibia is just like beef. The population numbers are very, very high, very stable. So they use that animal just like beef, and the amount of meat that you can get off a giraffe is quite a bit if you've ever seen a giraffe in person. So we sat over the fire and cooked on the ground with the giraffe legs to get the bone marrow. There was an ostrich there, and we sliced up some ostrich thigh, and I started cooking on a little grate, and had another person come over and join us, and he made a quick little marinade up, and at the end we were wrapping giraffe bone marrow with ostrich thigh meat and just sharing this experience together. And it was really touching, because again, we didn't speak each other's languages at all, but we all knew what we were there for, and we all had this like really amazing time.
Yes, that certainly puts you in a unique crowd again of circumstances that most people will never get to. And basically what I see you talking about is dispelling myths about what's edible, what's not. And we run into that here at home too. Like some people shoot a deer and they take the whole thing and make it into sausage. And that's their meat. They're allowed to, but step out of the box a little bit and try it different ways. But when we look at a deer, I always try to keep the heart and the liver, and a lot of people nowadays are keeping the caul fat from around the intestines itself. Mm-hmm. It's a very, I guess if it makes sense, it's a luxurious type of fat. It's very silky when it cooks, and you can put it on meatloafs and meatballs and stuff. and not
Yep.
only adds flavor, but helps keep the moisture in. So, you dispel
Yeah.
the myths about what's edible and what's not. Have you ever tried tongue, for instance?
Yeah. See, for me growing up, I'm part Italian. We grew up eating tongue and tripe and liver and never thought anything about it. That's just what we ate. And it wasn't until I got older to realize like a lot of people not only didn't eat it, but they like highly turned their nose up to it
They
and thought
do.
it was so disgusting. And it took a long time for me to see that the shift start happening in this industry. When I first started working in the industry, there still wasn't a huge push on the food. Everyone did it, but like you said, they generally ground up the whole animal and made sausages and called it a day. And then over the last, I would say probably 10 years, I've seen this really big shift. And everyone now is going, not only talking about their wild game, the meat and the different dishes that they're making, but taking immense pride in it and passing it on to groups like my personal hunting group of friends that we hunt with. Our little group chat used to start off with just talking strictly about where do we go hunting and, who can go. And now 90% of the posts are about these new dishes and photos of what we're all cooking and the recipe developments and stuff. And by no means did any of these other guys in the group come from a cooking background. Like this has all happened within the last 10 to 5 years type of thing. There's been a big push. And like you said, the offcut meats, whether it's tongue or heart or liver, which are the basics, they're right down to oysters or caul fats and marrow and all that kind of stuff. That's been getting even more popular over the last 2 or 3 years. And I think it's great to see because I always felt bad for people that just ground up their meat and called it a day. Because those, what they consider really tough cuts, whether it's a big game male, so that's off the chuck roast, so your front shoulders that everyone thinks is too tough to eat, to a Canada goose leg that you'll hear people swear up and down is impossible to eat because it's harder than a rubber tire. If you just learn the proper cooking methods that are generally very, very simple, those tough cuts also become the most mouth-watering, fall off the bone pieces of meat that you can harvest off the whole animal.
Yeah, it's funny, a lot of people, the cuts and the organs and the things that people turn up their nose at here are the delicacy in other places. And you bring up Namibia or even in the north. Like I've been up in the Arctic filleting fish, and there's raw fish eggs laying on the cutting board, and the kids are there grabbing them out from under your knife, eating them raw. That's just the way they're raised.
We had a very similar experience in Nunavut. We were taking apart a muskox, and the guide, we had the caul fat there, and he asked, are you going to take this? Do you mind if I take it? And we said, yeah, sure, go right ahead. And he was so happy to have that caul fat. And we asked him why, because it was new to us. This is going back several years now. And what they did with it, they'd boil it up and then they'd freeze it. And then the kids would actually like suck on it like an icicle or ice cream. And it was like their favorite treat in the world.
Right.
But they put that above the meat.
Yeah, fat is very big in their diet, and whenever I've been up there, they look for the biggest piece of bone marrow and the steak or a piece of meat with the biggest piece of fat on it, because that to them is the delicacy.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be like that extreme or that, shocking to North Americans to think of like caul fat or tongue or whatever. It can come back to the simplest things of like species even. So for me, bear is one of my favorites, especially black bear. And when I first started doing the show, majority of people that you would talk to either thought you couldn't eat bear or that, again, it wasn't edible because they look at a bear as just being a predator and they're only eating meat, which obviously is not the case. That they're an omnivore, so they eat everything. And mainly their main diet is plant-based and fruits and stuff. And watching someone telling me that something is inedible, I absolutely love, because that's like this new challenge to me. And I always love trying to change people's minds. And you're not going to always win everyone over, but I always tell people when I'm cooking for them, try it. If you don't like it, that's okay. But at least try it. Don't just turn your nose up at it. And a lot of people will say, well, I've had that once before and I didn't like it. And my personal motto is try everything twice, especially when it
That's a
comes
great
to cooking.
motto. Yeah.
You never know who cooked it, how they cooked it, and not to mention there's about 7 to 10 other different steps before you even get to the cooking process where that meat can be ruined.
Yes, or not in its optimal presentation.
Right. There's so many aspects to it. And like for me, one of the events where I always talk about when it comes to someone saying they don't like something and trying to change their mind. I was in Newfoundland years ago and with a whole bunch of really like old time guides that were rough and tough and they've seen it all and done it all. And we had shot a moose and a bear. And I was talking to the cook in the camp and I said, do you mind if I take over for a night and cook for the camp, which she was happy to let me do. But everyone was saying, don't do you're not going to cook the bear, right? Like you can't, I only feed bear to my dog. And I started laughing. I said, yeah, I'm going to cook this and I won't tell anyone you ate it, but let's just try it once. And I cooked the bear and the moose in exactly the same way at the same time in 2 different pans. And they devoured the bear. Like there wasn't a stitch of bear left. And there's almost a whole plate of moose sitting there, not touched.
Yeah, they actually got to try it prepared properly, and it was a real eye opener. And I think modern hunters are very good at that. They've gone out of their way to find new ways to cook game. It's like me with goose legs. Most people said for years they're just not edible. You don't do anything with them. You introduce people to them, and now they like goose legs better than the breast meat. And that's a win for all of us.
Absolutely.
The one thing that I wanted to discuss with you, Michael, is introducing new people to wild game. I don't believe it's a good idea to trick people. And I'll give you an example. No. Years ago, we had a neighbor over, and his wife was in the hospital having one of their kids. So my dad had made some rough grouse stew, and he came in and had supper, and he thought it was the best. He had 2 big helpings, and he said out loud, "Oh, that chicken stew is awesome." And my dad said, "Well, that's not chicken. That's rough grouse." And he got up from the table and ran to the bathroom and got sick. And it's hard for some people to believe that, but some people have a real mental stigma about wild game. So fooling people is not an option in my books. It's getting them to try it and convincing them by their real experience. I do cheat a little bit because kids are always more open-minded, and if they have kids with them, it's usually easier to get them to try it, which in turn goats mom and dad into maybe giving it a try and being a little bit more open-minded.
Yeah, that's a good method. I totally agree with you. That I have a very, very hard rule in my house that I never trick people into what they're eating. I think it does way more harm than good, and the chances when you tell someone the story behind the meat and what it is and where it came from and everything, I think high majority of the time, those people are going to respect not only what you're cooking, but yourself and your methods and how you hunt. Because a lot of times you're going to be feeding wild game to people that have nothing to do with hunting. They have no connection to it. The only connection might be yourself that you're doing it. So, again, it's about representing hunters and lifestyle the proper way. And for me, I found wild game, you can pretty much serve any wild game to anyone that's never tried wild game before, but there are definitely some staples that I like to go to. For where I live, I have certain animals that are accessible to me a little more readily than others, goose being a big one, and ducks. So I like to do those. Again, you can keep it simple where you're cooking it like a beef steak and high heat for a very short period of time, but seasoned with nice just salt and pepper, but heavily seasoned, doing like a butter basting with rosemary and garlic near the end to get a crust. But if you slice that thin, rather than just serving them a whole breast or a big chunk of meat on a plate, take the time, slice it thin for them. That's going to change the texture and the actual bite that they have. Because if they're going to just leave it up to them and make it like a steak, and it'll be a big cube piece and it's just going to be too chewy. But if you slice it thin, take the time to give it a little extra care into it, they're going to have this melt in your mouth piece of meat that now they get to really just concentrate on the flavor because we've already passed the texture test on the mouth.
Right. There's a
And
couple
there's other
things.
little,
Yeah, there's a couple things you have to get past them. Not just the flavor, but the texture and everything else.
texture is huge. And I think a lot of people, it's one of the very first things I find they say is it's too chewy or too tough or just whatever, too grainy. And the biggest mistake I think most cooks do, whether it's domestic or wild, but especially wild game, is that they're overcooking and under seasoning. And as soon as you overcook most wild game, your flavor is going to change tremendously and your texture is going to get so tough and grainy, especially when it comes to the Canada Goose. So you get the whole liver, example. I've always said it tastes like livers because people are cooking it too long. A nice, medium to large size Canada Goose breast, you're talking 6 to 8 minutes of total cook time over high heat if you're doing it like over a barbecue or on a cast iron. And there's other slower methods you can do smoking and it'll take longer to do. But I think a lot of people don't realize that you need to cook these most game meat to medium rare at the most. And then there's other animals that they're going to be carrying, like possibly carrying trichinosis, like bear. You're going to have to learn how to cook those bigger, but that's where the magical cooking method of braising, for me, I think, is what changes the game in so many ways.
Absolutely.
For all those tough meats.
Yeah, and you raise a good point because it's just not wild game or the texture. Sometimes it is the cooking. Like I've got family members that like meat well done. They don't like to see any red run on their plate. But after years of serving wild game and other people raving about it, they've changed. I now have everyone in our household will eat medium rare deer, elk, moose, whatever it is, and they enjoy it because it is tender. And if you do cook it well done, I suggest you find some recipes where you can braise them or put them in a slow cooker or do a pot roast, because you either do it medium rare or you cook them until they surrender. You get them through that tough spot to break down even further.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a big key to cooking wild game, is just learning how to do it. It takes a lot less time than domestic game with all that fat on it, because you don't have to heat through those layers. So where you'd cook a beef steak for 12 to 16 minutes, you do an elk steak for like 7 minutes. And be the same doneness.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people want to, they just want to know it. They want to just do it, have it done quick and out of the way. But if you just take the time to, and it doesn't even have to be a lot of time, just take that little bit of time to learn how to properly do it. You can be serving such amazing food. And instead of chucking everything into that grind pile, you can, start learning how to braise meat. Just a little bit of water, creating with some heat, create some steam, trap that steam, and it like breaks down all those amazing pieces of meat. And if you compare those wild game cuts, whether you're talking a chuck roast or even right down to a shank, like you go to a restaurant and get ossobuco, like you're spending the top dollar. That's going to be the most expensive thing on that menu. And 90% of hunters take that piece of meat and chuck it into a grind pile if it's lucky.
If it's lucky.
Pile.
Yes.
Yeah, there's so many people that don't even realize they think it's even too tough for a grind pile because there is filled with sinew. I just did a black bear shank on my smoker, and it was, I think, 3 ingredients and some beef stock being one of those, and barely any time at all, and that thing was fall apart in your mouth. Like all those tough layers that are in there just become this like molten jelly, beautiful fat, and it's just the texture in your mouth, the flavor tastes just like beef, especially with just a little bit of beef sauce. It doesn't mean you have to do all these magical things to these tough cuts or elaborate cooking methods that take a long time. They can be really, really simple and produce amazing results.
Absolutely. And braising is often misunderstood. It sounds like it's a direct heat source, but it's not. As you mentioned, it's a airtight container with some moisture, and steam it and just leave it in there to get real happy. It just takes a little bit of time. And whether you use broth or wine or beer or even just water, things like tomatoes work great because it got some acid in it to help break it down as well. Mm-hmm. You can get very creative in terms of the liquids that you use to braise different types of meat, and especially the ones with a lot of connective tissue. You talked about how it breaks down, and what people don't realize is a lot of those silver skins and gristle lines cook into collagen and gelatin, and they actually just add flavor to the broth. They cook out of it. They're no longer there holding the muscle groups together. They're fall apart tender. And what you see when it's raw is very different than what you see when it's done being braised.
Quite different.
Now, I ask everyone that comes on the show a question. You probably already know what it is. What is your favorite wild game recipe?
Wild game recipe. That changes for me every kind of depending what time of year I'm in.
Every week,
hearty
yes.
dishes and light. Yeah, every week I should say. But yeah, hearty dishes and light dishes, and depending on what time of year it is for me, then I'm gonna switch back and forth. Recently, I developed a new recipe that I was very, very happy with, and it's kind of become my new favorite. And it was a moose loin that I butterflied out, and then I filled with cream cheese and some caramelized onion and a little bit of thyme and sliced garlic. And then I rolled it back up into a pinwheel or a roulade and tied it up and did some steak seasoning on the outside, threw it in the smoker and cooked that for, I think it was around 2 hours, and then took it out and just basted it in, again, with butter and garlic in a cast iron pan. And that thing was so good. I actually did a side-by-side comparison with using beef and then using this moose. And funny enough, the moose tasted more like a nice, strong piece of beef than the beef did when everything was said and done.
It just accepted all those other ingredients well.
Yeah, it was juicy. It had a beautiful smoke ring. The smoke, just a little bit of time in the smoker, but that smoke flavor came through, and with all the cream cheese and the onions, kept that moisture within the actual cook and not letting it all just dry out. And stuffing things, like you said, with your crane thighs, I think a lot of people either think it's too elaborate or too tricky. And it's a really good little hack for those tougher pieces of meat, whether it's tough or tender, but especially those tougher pieces of meat, because it just keeps that moisture in. Because we're dealing with wild game most of the time here, and we're talking low fat content, so you got to learn how to add either extra fat or moisture to your meats while you're cooking them.
Adding moisture or maintaining moisture is key. You know, you and I are food geeks. I classify myself as a food geek as a compliment, but you actually have lots of this stuff on your social media sites and a YouTube channel as well. So I'm hoping you're going to share those with us, and we can put it up when we run the show and people can check out some of your recipes firsthand.
Yeah, we have a number of recipes, some videos up and stuff on our YouTube channel. So it's just Can in the Rough at the YouTube. And we also have Facebook and Instagram with Can in the Rough, and we're constantly posting recipes, whether it's in picture and post format or video format. And for myself, I'm on Instagram. It's a Mikey _EH. You can find me there, and I'm posting much more than we end up posting on our Can in the Rough page, because, like you said, I'm a food geek, and if we just kept posting every single thing I did that I want to post, our Can in the Rough Facebook page would just be filled with meat all the time.
Right. Well, we look forward to seeing the new season. I really appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your experiences around the world, and certainly within Canada, and having an Alberta-based boy on our show. So thanks for coming and joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Brad. I really appreciate it.
We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.